Welcome to the Elevate Podcast, a resource designed to help your ministry take the next step. Whether you're leading a team, navigating church leadership, or preparing for the future, this podcast will equip you with practical tools, real conversations, and lessons learned from those who've been there before. I'm Darrel, Girardier, Communications Director at Brentwood Baptist Church. And in today's episode, we're diving into a topic that's reshaping the way church works, AI tools for ministry. Let's jump in. Madi Wuebben. Madi Wuebben.
What's up?
How are you, friend?
I'm good.
Are you ready for today's conversation?
I am. I'm nervous, but we're just jumping in.
We're just going to go in the deep end of the pool. We're just going to talk about AI. Nothing big.
Should we remind people who we are?
You know what? That is a great idea. That's why you're on this episode, to remind me of what I should say. So, Madi, tell the audience about who you are and what you do here at Brentwood Baptist.
I'm Madi Wuebben. I'm Promotions Director here at Brentwood. If you've been listening, you've heard that Brentwood Baptist is one church with 9 locations across Nashville. So I work with a team on our communications team, overseeing marketing, promotions, branding for all 9 campuses.
Yeah, you do a lot. You got a lot going on your plate. And I am the Communications Director. I work with Madi on that, video post-production, AI, amongst other things, a lot of things, marketing, PR, the whole 9 yards here at Brentwood Baptist. We are one church with 9 locations. So I tell people we are one comms team for really 9 churches at the end of the day, because that's what it feels like.
9 plus.
9 plus, yes, exactly. So today's topic, AI. So when we talk about AI, Madi, how would you, for the audience, let's level set for a second. How would you define AI? Like if you were if you were given like the old explain it to me like I'm 5, what would you say?
I would say that AI is the way we use it generally, and the way most people are going to interact with it, is a tool set that takes all the knowledge of everything, and it is pretty much prompt based, and it generates work, ideas, functions for you. It is like the ultimate extreme tool for anybody. Most commonly used is ChatGPT. So if we're recording this in March of 2025, that's kind of the king of AI today.
Yeah, roughly adding 1 million users per hour, I think is what the rate they're adding at, which if you think about from an adoption rate of any technology, that's absolutely insane in terms of the adoption rate.
How would you define it? I may not have given a great one.
No, I think you did a great job. I think it's funny because it is a little bit, it's interesting because a lot of us are backgrounds in liberal arts, and all of a sudden this is a mathematical thing that we're having to define for the audience. So I think the way I would think about it is think about the progression of the web. When you and I first encountered the web back in the day, Web 1.0, we went there to do what? Find information. We went there to go get a sports score, get a recipe. There was static information. I go and get that information. Then you get to Web 2.0, and 2.0 is like Facebook, Instagram. Like I can now give it information, it gives information back to me. So I'm almost having like a dialogue with the web in a very low key way. 3, which is really when AI takes hold, is the web is now giving me my preferences. It is predicting what I may like. So you've actually used AI, and if you open up Netflix has got, hey, here's your suggested list of movies we think you may like based off the ratings of what you've given us or what you've watched. So AI on a base level is really a prediction of what the tool thinks you want or need based off of trained data of millions, if not billions, of text, video, and images. So it's really a prediction tool. At the end of the day, that's what it's doing. So when you hear words in terms like machine learning or language models, that is talking about this is the stuff that it's been trained on to predict stuff for you. So I think I think for you and I, that's where I think people get lost. They kind of go,
it's so scary.
It's so scary. So so let's kind of dive into that. Like, what for you makes, when you talk to ministries, when you talk to even people in our own staff, what are the concerns you hear about AI, and how do you address them, or how do you think about people's fears of AI?
I think most people are afraid of losing the ability to perform certain tasks. They're afraid of looking incompetent, and they're generally like, oh, this could replace me, so I don't want to use it. I think the primary use most people start using AI is in a writing place of can you summarize all this information? Or I need to look at this, even an Excel file type context, or I need to write an email. I need to write a guide. That's how almost like step one for so many ministers that I work with is using AI. And when they touch it, they're like, oh, but it doesn't sound like me. Or I don't want to not learn how to write. This is like losing cursive. Like those are all the fears people have, instead of saying, okay, well, how does this free up time for me? What is this replacing? What could I gain in step? But also, if this is the way the world's moving, some of the conversations I have to have on the back end are, but if you pick this up, what else do you gain by learning this tool? So I think that's where most ministries start, but it does feel scary of like, are we losing our ability to work is what we hear most pushback. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think we hear the pushback on the work aspect of it. I think what is different for people with this technology, because I went back and looked at the history of like when email was introduced and like what were the fears about email. And the fears about email when it was introduced, when it had mass adoption, because it was introduced in 1971, but mass adoption happens about 25 years ago with AOL, Hotmail, those type of things. I know I'm dating myself by listing those out.
I never used AOL.
Yes, you don't need to remind me. So with that was people were worried about information overload. Mm-hmm. They were worried about spam. They were worried about not having enough human interaction with people because it was going to strip all that away. And I think honestly, at the time, those are valid concerns. Well, guess what? We're still having human interaction.
Yeah.
We have spam, but we've done a really good job of getting rid of a lot of spam. There is still that, you still deal with it on an occasional basis. Information overload is a real problem, but a lot of my mind is self-inflicted by us. I think with this technology, where I think for people, there's two fundamental things that make it different. And that was when ChatGPT launched and it actually did the chat interface. Mm-hmm. Two things occurred. First off, it gave answers in an authoritative nature, an authoritative way. In other words, it just said, if you asked the question, when was Pearl Harbor bombed? It said, December 7th, 1941. Boom. Okay. And you were just like, okay, that must be it. That must be the day. Okay. It did that because, again, it had thousands of pre-trained data it looked at, and it said with a 99.9% prediction rate, this is the date they're looking for. Okay. So one, it's authoritative. Two, you could have a human dialogue with it. So you could ask the questions. Well, what happened on this day? What about, you could all of a sudden and honestly, its responses were not just plain spoken computer. All of a sudden it had an emotive tone, exclamation points, question marks. All of a sudden it was using adverbs. And so all of a sudden it feels more human in its dialogue. So you have the authoritative nature with the human-like touch, and people are going, wait a minute, time out. This is not Google where I'm just Googling something and I get 10 blue links, and I can intuitively for myself decide what is the real piece of information. This is being authoritative. It's telling me. And on top of that, it sounds really human. Mm-hmm. And so I think I get the scary nature of it. But let me ask you this question. You're Gen Z.
Yes.
What is your primary communication method?
Text message or DM.
Yeah. All right.
Maybe FaceTime, honestly.
Yeah, I could see that. But yeah, you're mostly text. Mm-hmm. So doesn't that interface of texting with a chatbot or texting with ChatGPT, do you feel somewhat natural based off of your current communication methods? Oh,
totally. Because so many of these models kind of mimic your tone. So it'll talk to you really conversationally. You can cut it off like you would in a text message. If it starts rambling and I'm like, oh, wait, but that's not what I meant. And so I can talk to it like I'm talking to a friend. And it's going to relate what it thinks I want to hear, which is similar to relationships. If you're not going to tell me something I don't want to hear unless you really don't like me. So
yeah. So how do you address this? So if we know it has got authoritative nature, it's conversation-like. What boundaries do you put in place for ministry? You say, hey, this is where like 100% go there, knock it out, use it. And what is the no-fly zone of like, don't go there for you when it comes to AI?
Yeah. One really helpful metric is this informing your idea or is it making your idea or decision for you? And so whether that is, hey, I am a student minister and I need to come up with an icebreaker tonight, and I'm going to get in ChatGPT and be like, I have 50 6th through 12th graders, co-ed, I have $50 and I have an hour to go to Target, give me 10 game ideas, or I have 50 pool noodles, tell me what to do. That's great but what happened was I am telling it what I need. I started with a prompt and I'm going to make the decision. That's like fair game. Use it for ideas, use it to generate concepts, but the decision making needs to live with the user. And so that is like a really fun idea. We are on the communication side, so we're dealing with mass communication all the time, writing scripts, writing mass emails, press releases, all those kinds of things. I can't just trust it to have the authority. I am going to give it some really detailed instructions. I am going to proofread it, because ultimately I can't say, oh, sorry, that was wrong, senior pastor, chat wrote it. That's not going to go well. So I still need to proof it. And make sure it's like accurate. And we can talk more about that later in the episode of how to inform tools to best represent your church. But I think that's really helpful when it comes to the ministry side of like spiritual spaces. So sermon prep, sermon review, writing small group questions, writing devotional content. We would say that is a gray area, that there is room to play, room to inform. I mean, if you're using like Logos, there are AI tools in there where you're asking it, hey, I'm looking for like relating text on this, and it's using the tool. So we just haven't called that because you're using a trusted source. So you do need to know, like, there are tools that you're already using that you trust that are using it, but you're not asking ChatGPT, hey, if David said this in this Psalm, what does this mean when, like, you're not trusting it as the primary source. It can inform, and even in like small group questions, I think this is like a highly debated subject. If you're Googling, should churches use AI? I think that is when, again, you're giving a framework of, hey, tonight my women's study is going through the book of John, and we read this chapter, and I really want to dig into questions on, am I abiding in Christ? Can you give me 10 questions about that? Instead of just saying, can you write 10 small group questions for me tonight? Like, I'm coaching it, and I think that's when you can like go back and forth on it. I'm not mindlessly using the tool. I'm using it to inform my work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think you hit it on the head where like I'm using it to gather information. I'm still in the seat of decision making. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a key point right there. I think at the end of the day, if you think I think there's two things that it's a no-fly zone, and that's preaching and pastoring. Mm-hmm. I would not build tools by which people are being pastored or shepherded through AI. Mm-hmm. They can get information on topics and subject matters, but to be honest with you, to have that in-depth, real one-on-one conversation, that needs to happen in the confines of ministry. I think when it comes to preaching, I don't think there's anything wrong with, as you said, using the latest tools to find out in what commentary they said this, and you're just pulling together those things, or you're stuck and going, okay, I'm here, but I need to get here. You know, what has been done and preached beforehand that I can kind of pull from that you've preached before, you know, that you, the pastor, have set up for yourself. I think there's tools you can do that with. I think that's okay. I think when you're asking it to write a sermon, yeah, I think you've crossed the line, and I definitely don't think you need to do that. I think beyond that, though, I think there's a lot of ways it can increase efficiency and effectiveness, and I think you should explore that. I do think to a certain degree we're having a conversation across the church right now with AI, and I feel a little bit like we're going to look back, and I think probably less than 5 years and go, I can't believe we had that conversation because we now just do X, Y, we just do X, Y, and Z. It's kind of like the conversation of streaming. Should you stream your worship service? We're like, oh, don't do that. And then COVID hit, and guess what? Yeah. We're all doing it. And guess what? It's now a thing. We didn't stream. We have 9 locations. Each has their own pastor. We only streamed 2. I think it was at that time maybe 2, or maybe I think it was only 2 of our 9 locations at the time. Actually, we had 8, so it was 2 of the 8. And then COVID hit, and we had to spin up 8 streams at the same time. Mm-hmm. Guess what? We still have 8 streams. This is our standard. This is what we do. So when we think about ministry, you kind of set, I think, some pretty good parameters for us. Let's talk about all the other stuff. Yeah. How do you respond to a church staff member who goes, I feel like AI is going to eliminate my job? How do you respond to that in graceful, tactful way? How do you give them hope? How do you help them with their fears? How do you handle that?
It's a really good question. And I think, especially if you're a minister or you're a supervisor or even like a friend who's just trying to give like good counsel, I think there's some investigative questions you can ask. One thing we have learned over the last like 2 years, I would say, is when we're interviewing or when we're talking with our team members and they're hesitant towards AI, it is typically not about the tool. It is either like an ethical line, and we've kind of talked about those, like when is it okay? But oftentimes it's a curiosity thing or a fear of failure. If those are two often like struggles and like speed bumps to adopting new tools, is I don't know how to ask the right questions. I don't want to not look competent, so I'm just not going to use it and like make a big moral issue out of it, that type of thing. But I actually, like, when we've had this conversation on our team many times, and oftentimes I talk about a theology of work, of, hey, when God made us to work, like, this isn't a result of the fall, like, this is good. We're going to work in the new heavens and the new earth, and I don't know if there's going to be AI there. That's fine. But one of the things that's important is, like, we are made to work, and there will always be more work for you to do. The tools and work that we have today are for the season for today. But if I have a copywriter who is going to get replaced by AI tools on my team, one, there is now new work that has to be done because that tool exists. So it's not just like an industry got erased, but also like as a supervisor and as we're thinking about the economy of our church and how are we using resources, it is, okay, if I am able to replace this for a lot less money, like I'm not spending $70,000 on a position, I'm spending $200 a month on a tool. Instead, what can I do with that position? Is there a new work that has to be done? There's always more work to be done. I don't know anyone in ministry who's like, I don't have enough to do and I have too many people here. No one's telling me that. So if that's your church, I would love to meet you. But there's always more work to be done. So oftentimes it's just the position, it has to change. And that's often like a maturity, like coachable. What else does God have for you? This isn't an end of your career conversation, but there is some like natural coaching.
You just sound like every HR conversation. God has a new plan for your life. And like, that's the HR conversation we're letting you go.
But there's like some real coaching, like when you're in the boss seat or in a pastoral seat of we're changing the tool set we're using. And especially if it's someone you want along for the ride, like they're bought into the mission, they're a great worker. If it is an issue of like hesitancy to use a tool, then that's some like really great coaching opportunity for them to advance their career. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it was a technologist named John Gruber who actually said this a few weeks ago, and I thought he hit it on the head, because we really encountered this in our world at a pretty rapid rate, probably more than any other ministry inside the church. And he pointed out the idea of like, think back to, let's go back 300 years and you wanted a family portrait. What would you do? You would go hire a painter. Mm-hmm. Well, first off, you'd be rich enough to hire a painter, and then you're going to spend all day, guess what? Posing for the actual painting. Okay. And only rich people could do that. Then you move forward a couple hundred years, and guess what? They invent the camera. And now everybody can get a family photo. It doesn't matter. Money doesn't become nearly an issue. That piece of creative act is now democratized, and now everybody can do it. It didn't mean that painters were out of work. There are plenty of people who still do that. The difference is if you still want to do that thing, you got to be better than everybody else.
Yeah.
You have to be at the top 5 to 1%. And this is the hard part about this conversation is that there will be a lot of things that people hold dear because it's their joy to do. And I'm not saying they should not do those things, and that just because AI can do it, that we shouldn't have let them do that. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is eventually AI does come knocking on the door, and eventually you probably do have to hand that over. And that's really hard. The way I think, if I was in that shoes when I'm dealing with somebody who thinks that AI is going to take their job, is I would say, look, I think the beauty of this technology, for the church is this, is that it strips away everything that's non-human about our work. Email is only 25 years old. Go back to your email conversation. Ministry happened before email came along. Ministry happened before websites came along. Ministry happened before streaming came along. What AI is going to do is going to strip away. AI is going to answer your emails. AI is going to make that Excel grid. AI is going to update the website. Guess what? You get to do the real part of ministry, which is the flesh and the blood. It's meeting with people, breaking bread with people.
Yeah.
The disciple-making part of it. That is where the church has a massive advantage in this environment, because we're in the business of disciple-making, and we all know, studies upon studies will show this, disciple-making happens best in the context of relationships gathered around a table. That's what the church does the best. AI is never going to replace that. So that thing is future-proof. If you optimize your job for that and your church for that, you're going to be fine. If you're reliant on systems that can be replaced by AI, then you're optimizing for the wrong thing. You and I had this dialogue off camera, which was, your church inherits the DNA of the technology it was born in.
Yeah.
So churches that were born in, say, like the 1940s, 1950s, probably they were in the radio technology. So they inherited all the technologies of that day. All right, you go 70s, 80s, 90s, TV. 2000, early 2000s, or actually mid 2000s, upper mid 2000s, you're talking YouTube, streaming.
Yeah.
And then churches in the last 5 to 10 years, you would say what? Instagram, Facebook, TikTok?
Yeah.
Yeah. So so those churches that are I call Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, churches that grew up in that age, or what would you say some of the characteristics of those churches are?
I think that sermons are now almost written to be like clickbaity.
Right.
Like, I need to be as pointed and as direct as possible. You're not going to listen to a 70-minute radio special. You're going to listen to a 90-second TikTok clip. You might go and listen to more later, but the preaching style is so much more direct, and the follow-up is so much more direct. It's like, comment this and we'll set up a small group meeting. It's not a come to a banquet and we're going to present.
Yes.
It's so different.
It's so different. Now, we could argue whether or not that's valid to do it that way, but you and I would say, like, that is ingrained in your culture. So if I was a church planner today, and I'm starting out with an AI first mentality to my work, then I'm going to ask the question, can AI do that? So if I'm just I'm the church planner, I'm out there starting a church. You know, all the stuff you have to set up. You got to set up, you probably at some point want to set up a database of like who's actually in your church. You want to actually handle donations. You probably want a website presence. You're going to build a social media presence. I'm thinking of all the communications aspect of the work, and there's a bunch of administrative.
You're going to have a calendar. You're going to have a place for people to sign up.
Exactly. Guess what? I want AI to handle all that.
Yeah.
I will pay the $200 a month to OpenAI's ChatGPT Pro, the top tier version, because it's going to handle so much of that work. Yeah. So to me, I think it's really about really helping people adopt that mentality. Now, let's talk about that shift. So let's kind of move into the tools aspect of the conversation. So let's say somebody's like, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. Let's do this. Madi, where should they start?
I would start first with a tool like ChatGPT because it has multiple functions. It has the writing function, it has some art and image functions, it has insane tools for, I'm going to bring in an Excel sheet on my databases, that type of thing. I would go on YouTube and I would find the most recent tutorial video, because if you find a video from 2 months ago, the tool, like ChatGPT, has changed. You can also ask ChatGPT to coach you. You can walk into any of these tools and be like, this is my first time using you. How should I use you to do X? Fill in the blank. And it really will coach you. So that's so wonderful. I would make a list or I would look at your job description or your weekly calendar, and I would figure out what are some like technology-based tasks that are taking your time. So I'm thinking about some of our admins, like they run our churches, we all know that, but half of their job is calendar management. Okay, this is a great first step, are our calendars synced, either on Outlook or Google or wherever, in a way that an AI calendar manager can manage it for you. That doesn't mean an admin or if you're a professional staff that you're never checking it, but that will free how much time off of your plate. Okay, next. What is your regular communication? How can I just automate this so it's like pretty standard? I just have to proof it. I'm going to give it the info. It's going to give it back. Those type of things. That's where I would probably start if I was just a normal church figuring it out. Go through that list of what are my technology-based tasks first before I go into people stuff.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I would say I think first off, I would say with one, how do you adopt an AI first mentality? Mm-hmm. You do that through a couple of things. One, you have to make it a daily habit. Mm-hmm. So this is not an original idea. Like ChatGPT, for those of you who don't know, because somebody asked me the other day, is it an app? Is it a website? It's actually both. So you just literally just Google ChatGPT, you can find it. So what I would do, and again, these are not original ideas, is I would first start making it your homepage. Make it the homepage on your browser. Make it so that every day you open up and that's the first thing you see. And you'll say, okay, today I'm going to try this. The beautiful thing about it is you will fail the first time, and that's more than okay. It's okay to fail at this. So I would, one, make it your homepage. Mm-hmm. Second thing I would do is I would take your iPhone, and most iPhones, if you have the latest software, it's got a whole bunch of AI integrations in it. I'm not talking about that. What I want you to do is actually just use the voice memo. And I want you to just ramble. Like, have all your ministry thoughts and just dump them out. Like, okay, I need to create an email. I need to tell staff this. I need to do, and you just start vomit into the phone of all the stuff that's on top of your head. Yeah. I got to write this. I got to do this. I got to do this. And then take that raw transcript and literally feed it to ChatGPT and said, can you make this hot mess of everything? Can you turn it into an email? Can you do this? And it'll all of a sudden just organize all of your thoughts. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, great. Mm-hmm. You can turn around and say like, yeah, actually that thing right there, I said, can you actually work on that and craft that into an email? And can you actually turn that into an outline for me? And then all of a sudden, like, it really becomes your assistant, and it lets you do, again, you're going back to do the thing that you were designed to do, which is, disciple, just be a human and not sit on a computer screen all day, because it's handling all that in the background, especially for those of us who like to take long walks. It's just a great thing to just turn it on and just think out loud and let it record, copy the transcription, and just put it in ChatGPT. Mm-hmm. That's base level. Yeah. Easy to do. We're not asking you to create anything. It's just, it kind of gets you geared up to it.
We also, across so many of our teams, use a feature, like you can pay for a tool like Otter AI, or you can actually do it through like your free voice memo transcription on your iPhone of, I'm going to record a meeting I'm in because I actually want to be present. If I'm taking notes, I'm distracted and now I'm in my calendar, now I'm whatever. So I'm just going to let this like sit and record. I'm going to give the audio file, ask for a transcript. Your iPhone will do it automatically. You can use other free websites like transcript.io or whatever. And then give the transcript to an AI tool like ChatGPT or Claude or Microsoft Pilot or whatever you want to use and say, hey, can you give me a summary of this? Can you tell me what action steps we talked about? What are follow-up questions I should ask after this because I kind of forget the meeting? Or we had a Easter meeting like 2 months ago, and I'm like, I know we talked about timelines for a deliverable, but I don't really know. I'm just going to send the file and be like, what time did I tell them? Because I didn't take it. So that is like the prime, hey, I want to be present with people. And I think that's the number one concern is, well, if I get so techy, I'm not people oriented anymore. Instead saying, actually, I want this to, there's a concept called like building a second brain. I'm going to let this have all of my notes, all of my questions, all of my follow-up, and I can just be present. I can look you in the eye. If I need to pray for you after a meeting, I can. I'm not like, actually, sorry, let me go ahead and calendar the next meeting. I'm going to have the notes calendar.
Exactly. So let's kind of get low. Let's get one step more granular. Let's talk tools. Let's actually talk real tools. Yes. So our current tech stack as is. Yeah. So you and I both use Otter AI, Otter.ai to record meetings, because the beauty of that tool is it can also recognize voices in the room and can figure out who's talking, and you can actually assign it different voices. Yep. You can have a dialogue with the transcript, say, what did we decide on this? And then you can also just export it to a Word doc if you just want it for your files. It also make a summary of the conversation and give you action items for that. All right. What else is on your tech stack besides that?
I use Claude as my primary writing tool. So a lot of my job really is writing copy. I manage our brand. I do a ton of our promotional copy, email marketing, writing scripts, all kinds of things. And so Claude has been the most like humanistic voice we found, and it does a great job of mimicking. So I can give it a transcript of a sermon from a pastor and be like, I actually really need them to write a 3 email campaign on why you should go to a gospel conversation training. And it like nails, it sounds, but that has been like the primary writing tool.
Claude AI is, I think we've done tests with it. Google Gemini, some other stuff we'll talk about here in a second. By far, the best writer of all the writers we tested out.
What are you using for your calendar?
So my calendar is Fantastical, is what I use on the Mac to actually manage it. Now, I will say that I'll use when I get super hyper busy, where the world is just like, I can't deal with it all. It's called motion. And what you do is you literally the beauty of that is it tells you if you've overcommitted. You go, I promised way too much. So this stuff is no longer high priority, or these that's a lot. What are you using for, say?
I do use ChatGPT for some, and I've used Google Gemini for the other. Pros and cons are both of them you can give specific sources. So I think an important thing when you're thinking about research is you still have to tell it what a credible source is. So you just have to decide what type of questions. So for example, I was in Utah last week and I was asking a lot of questions about the LDS church. I had an open dialogue with ChatGPT, and that one felt very safe. It was not in a very authoritative setting where I needed to whatever, but if it was something where like we're preparing for a podcast, I'm preparing to teach, that type of thing, I'm going to use something where I can like really clearly say, this fact came from this article and I can find it really quick, which I think is a good safeguard if you're ever doing research. Yeah,
Gemini is the best at the deep learning. What it allows you to do is you'll see a button when you use it called deep research mode. And you click it and it actually gives you the map for what it's going to do on deep. Like it's like a PhD student who's like, hey, I'll research on that subject. Here's my plan. Are you good with my plan? You'll say, I like that plan. And then it hits up like 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 websites and then builds basically a report for you that you can export out to Google Docs. Or this is the crazy part. When I showed this to our staff, I think it freaked them out, let's be honest. It generates an audio overview. So about a 10-minute podcast of what sounds like two humans like you and me having a dialogue about the subject matter, which is my favorite thing in the world.
They'll add in ums.
Yes, they add it's like, oh gosh. I think they even named the podcast the Deep Dive, I think is what they call it, which is really, really cool. Yeah, so I think by far that's the best. ChatGPT is kind of in my mind, it's the best all around.
Yeah.
It's the Swiss Army knife. It's the one that you want to make fun images of, like you want to take somebody and turn them into a Muppet. You can do fun images like that. It does the research. It does a lot of things well in regards. So it's probably like, again, like you and me, for you and me, it's like, it's a Swiss Army knife. It probably has the best dialogue. For those of you who don't know, a lot of these tools have what we call voice mode. And what that means is you basically hit a button and you just could turn your phone over. You don't have to look at it. And you just have a dialogue with the AI. Its dialogue mode is probably one of the more robust dialogue modes. The one that we use internally here that is not ranked very high, and I don't know what that says, well, I actually know what it says about the tool, and that's Microsoft Copilot. For some churches out there, your IT person, whoever in charge said, we're going to be Microsoft. We're not going to use Google, we're going to use Microsoft, so use Outlook and that type of thing. We use Microsoft, but I think we would say its tool is okay.
Yeah.
At best. If you have the money to do it, there's a pro version, and that is really like, that's on steroids, because what that does, it searches all of your hard drives, it searches all of your stuff, and it allows you to, it searches your calendar. It allows you to be, if you're at a church where you got a lot of people, it's really great because it can search your calendar, search all your documents. It can get really granular on some stuff. Let's talk one tool though. It's not in that tech stack. It's a little different. Talk to us about how we use Cast Magic for sermons and videos.
Yeah. Cast Magic is a tool that was created for podcasters originally, but we use it for sermon content too. It can pull in an MP3 file, a text file, it can pull in a YouTube link, a Vimeo link, and we will just drop our sermon in there. And we basically can set up our own preset responses of what we need. If I need a title, I need a description, I need action steps, you could have it write follow-up questions of how I need a small group guide for this, like, and I need you to ask these 3 questions first and whatever. So you could set up all those prompts, and all we have to do is drop it in, and it auto-generates them. I would say Cast Magic's writing on the stack is probably like a 6. We love them. They're really helpful. We do have to do a lot of tweaking on it, but that's okay, because one of the reasons why we use a tool is because of it saves us time. Basically, instead of starting at 0, we started at a 6. And so now the work to get from a 6 to a 10 to get to like a published point is way faster than me saying, hey, intern, can you listen to this sermon, and can you write the summary for YouTube, and can you come up with meta description? All that took so much time before. And especially on our team, we're doing it for 9 campuses. Yeah. So for us, that has been a game changer for time specifically.
Yeah, we use Opus Pro for all of our social media clips. So what Opus does, if you don't know, is you upload your sermon, and then Opus finds the most viral clips in the sermon, cuts it for you, does the subtitles, and you just either have to you can hit export button and then turn around and put it in Facebook, Instagram, whichever social media platform you want to use. And that is a huge time save of all of the tools we use is Opus Pro.
One of the questions we get a lot is, when do I need to give credit to AI?
Oh, that's a great question. So my transparency is needed. And in other words, I'll give you an example. Let's say you're preaching a sermon and you were talking about Noah's Ark, and you had a painting of a rendering of what Noah's Ark may have looked like. If you use AI, you just need to say, like, put a watermark on this, say, hey, I asked AI to create Noah's Ark and this is what it gave me. I think most people would be like, that's fine. That's the AI's rendering of it. You definitely have to be clear about it with the audience, with the idea for the audience that this thing actually really happened. That is where I think that line has to be drawn on that. It's one thing for you to say, like, hey, I want you to recreate this forest for a background for an art piece. That's a different ballgame. But when you are doing it in such a way that people are impression that thing is real and that event is real, that is where I think you have to be very clear that it's AI. Yeah, I think you have to.
And policy has changed so much for this over the last year, even when Instagram would automatically watermark images, and it would be like, I just used Photoshop to put text on a photo, it literally was a sermon quote graphic, guys, it's fine. So this part of technology is changing so fast, but we would just say, like, the same way if you were researching anything that you feel like what you would need to give credit to, if you're quoting a book, you need to put it in there. But if it's just like writing the first draft, we don't, especially here, we don't say, AI wrote draft 1 of this email from Pastor Jay.
No, it's good. Yeah, I think the one time we did use AI and it got massive, it was a big thing was when we were celebrating our senior pastor's 32nd anniversary, and it was also he was transitioning out of the role to something new, to a new nonprofit. He had this iconic photo of him, and he's holding up an iPad as if it's God's word. And I think he was saying, one of his catchphrases, if you will, was always, this is God's word for God's people, hear it, believe it, and live. And he'd always hold out his Bible, but that day he had an iPad. But it's just really beautiful shot. So Mallory, our wonderful designer, went and circled the hand and said, turn this into a Bible. And then we used that as the cover image for the magazine we produced about his ministry.
Yeah. It was the hero image for his retirement.
Yes, we used it for everything. And I was like, I'm totally okay with people thinking that's really a Bible, because that was the intent in that moment. Yeah. It really was.
Yeah.
Madi, what else before we wrap up? What else do you think we need to hit?
I think there's a lot of pastors and ministers who think about the conversation and say, well, but I got into this for the people in the room. Like, I'm really worried about people in the room, and like, I don't care about the tools. What would you say to those pastors?
Yeah. And by the way, like you're not wrong. You're exactly right. I think one of the, and it goes back, harkens back to our earlier conversation about people who have hesitancy of this is, technology all of a sudden now is like, it's everywhere, and everything has got technology in it. Everything is quote unquote smart. I have a smart fridge, a smart toaster, smart vacuum. You've got all these things, and for a lot of people, they're like, I'll hear the phrase, "I'm not technical." Well, two things. One about that. One, I get that. I understand that. There's some people that this is you naturally gravitate towards that. Two, I'd make the argument that actually you can learn this stuff again. It's just make it a daily habit and having a drive to do that. If you don't want to do that, that's okay. That's fine. What you would do, like anything else in life, is surround yourself with people who can do it, who are passionate about that. I think it's unfair for us to ask people to be passionate about technology in the way that you and I are. Yeah. I don't want to put that on any pastor or any staff member. I think that's unfair to do that. What I would ask for them is that if they are ultimately passionate about disciple making, if that's ultimately their passion, is ask the questions, who can I get to walk alongside me to help us use technology to free up resources and people for disciple making? That is what my hope and prayer for those people would be.
Absolutely. Our old senior pastor used to say this, and like people would like laugh, but there's kind of a truth to it. If I was a missionary and I moved somewhere and I never wanted to learn the language, we'd say, well, you're not fit to be a missionary. Yeah. And the thing about serving in any professional setting, if you're a pastor in the West, like if you're in the United States, AI is acceptable and adapted into all workflows. And so it is something that you need to adapt to, because this is the world and the place and the time you live. Yep. And that doesn't mean you have to be the master. It just means that you need to be confident and like fluent enough to live in this world. But yeah.
Fluent enough. That's what I'm going to put my LinkedIn bio.
I can get in an Uber. That's all I can get in.
I can get in an Uber. Yes. There we go. Awesome. Well, thank you, Madi, for hanging out.
Yes.
I appreciate this conversation.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to today's episode on AI tools for the church. For more practical help and conversations like this one, check out Elevate Church Conference, a one-day event designed to equip pastors, church leaders, and teams to lead with clarity and purpose in today's world. We're hosting this conference at Brentwood Baptist in Nashville, Tennessee on Tuesday, September 9th. We'd love for you to join us and have you here at the conference. Learn more and register at elevatechurchconference.com. Show notes and resources from today's episodes are available online. We'll see you next time on the Elevate Podcast.